48-year-old Darius Whitaker stood near the marble entrance of the Grand Oak Resort in Charleston, South Carolina. He wore a dark navy suit and held a thick leather document folder in his right hand. Across the room, 46-year-old Celeste Sterling stood in the center of the main ballroom under gold chandeliers, celebrating her 10-year wedding anniversary with her new husband, Derek. When Celeste turned and saw Darius standing near the door, her face changed from a smile to complete disgust. She walked across the room toward him, her heels clicking loudly against the floor, accompanied by two resort security officers. She stepped directly into Darius's space and looked at him with disdain. She asked him what he was doing there and how he managed to slip past the front lobby gate. She spoke loudly enough for 30 nearby high society guests to turn and watch. She told him that his presence was an embarrassment, that he was a failure, and that he did not belong in a luxury establishment like this. She told the security guards that Darius was an unwelcome trespasser and commanded them to drag him out of the building immediately. Darius did not step back, nor did he raise his voice. He looked directly into Celeste's eyes, noting her sharp features and the heavy diamond necklace she wore, which was a piece purchased years ago using corporate funds from their former business. He spoke quietly, telling her that she was making a severe mistake that she would not be able to undo once it was started. Celeste laughed out loud, a short, cold sound that carried across the room. She told her husband Derek, who had walked over to join her, that Darius was still living in the past and could not accept his low status in life. She told the head security officer that Darius was her bitter ex-husband who was trying to ruin her anniversary party because he had nothing left to his name. The head security guard put his hand on Darius's shoulder, preparing to forcefully turn him toward the exit doors. Before the guard could move him, a tall man in a black corporate suit hurried out from the executive elevator bank. It was Thurston Vance, the chief executive officer of the resort group. Thurston ignored Celeste completely, walked straight up to Darius, and extended his hand in front of the entire crowd, saying, "Mr. Whitaker, we have been waiting for you upstairs, sir." Before we continue this story, take a moment right now to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload, and leave a comment down below telling us where in the world you are watching from today. Your engagement helps us bring you more realistic, high-intensity narrative stories every single week. Celeste stopped moving, her hand frozen in midair where she had been pointing toward the entrance. The entire ballroom grew quiet as the surrounding guests turned their full attention to the resort executives. Thurston Vance did not acknowledge Celeste or Derek. Instead, he stepped back and signaled to three senior resort vice presidents who were standing behind him. Thurston turned back to Darius and informed him that the entire board of directors was gathered in the private penthouse suite on the top floor, fully prepared to sign the final transfer documentation. Celeste stepped forward, her voice rising in frustration and confusion. She asked Thurston why he was addressing a man who had been broke and stripped of his corporate standing 10 years ago. She demanded to know why the chief executive officer of Charleston's premier resort was speaking to her ex-husband as an honored guest at her private anniversary event. Thurston turned his head and looked at Celeste for the first time, his expression completely professional and devoid of emotion. He informed her that the ballroom she had reserved for the evening, along with the entire resort property, belonged to the umbrella corporation that Darius Whitaker controlled. Thurston added that Darius was not an intruder. He was the primary lender and incoming majority owner of the global resort chain. Derek stepped up beside Celeste, his face flushed red with anger, insisting that there had to be a technical error in the resort management registry. Derek stated that his firm had processed the event booking through Sterling Capital, the company Celeste had built after her divorce from Darius. Darius looked at Derek without any visible emotion. He told Derek that Sterling Capital had been operating on leveraged credit extended by an offshore holding company for the last 9 years. Darius added that the credit contract contained an acceleration clause that had taken legal effect at 6 o'clock that evening. To understand how Darius arrived at this moment, you have to look back 10 years to the Chancery Court in downtown Charleston. Darius and Celeste had spent 12 years of marriage building a regional commercial real estate and hospitality logistics company from the ground up. Darius had handled the strategic acquisitions, property titles, structural debt management, and legal filings, while Celeste focused on client networking, public relations, and high-level corporate branding. When their joint enterprise reached an appraised value of $40 million, Celeste initiated a secret plot with her senior financial analyst, Derek. Together, they manufactured false paper trails that made it appear as though Darius was embezzling corporate capital into offshore accounts. They took advantage of a specialized clause in their prenuptial agreement that penalized any partner found guilty of gross financial negligence during divorce proceedings. During the divorce trial, Darius was caught off guard by falsified audit reports provided by Derek's internal accounting team. The documents showed authorized transactions signed with Darius's digitized signature, transferring funds into unauthorized personal accounts that Derek had set up under Darius's name. The family court judge, relying on the presented financial records, ruled heavily in Celeste's favor. Celeste was awarded 90% of the corporate operating assets, the primary brand rights, and the family estate. Darius was left with an obscure, debt-burdened holding company named Apex Operations, which contained millions of dollars in uncollected commercial liabilities and several undeveloped land parcels located in rural zones. During their final meeting in the court hallway, Celeste looked at Darius and told him that he was simply not smart enough to survive in modern business. She told him he was a back-office worker who lacked vision, power, and presence. Derek assumed Darius's former position as president of the company the following Monday. Within 6 months, Celeste and Derek married, merged their assets, and rebranded the firm as Sterling Capital. They launched a massive public relations campaign, taking full credit for the regional expansion plans that Darius had designed over the previous decade. Darius did not make public statements, nor did he attempt to argue his case through local media outlets. He moved his personal belongings into a small, rented office space 3 miles outside Charleston's financial district. He brought along one trusted associate, Royce Miller, a veteran corporate restructuring attorney who had overseen Darius's early business deals. Royce carefully examined the divorce decree and the original corporate charter of the umbrella entity that Celeste's legal team had discarded during the trial. Royce discovered a critical technical oversight made by Celeste's attorneys in their rush to seize the high-value operating assets and brand names. Celeste had taken the operating subsidiary that controlled daily cash revenues, but she had left the underlying primary debt framework assigned to Apex Operations. The land titles attached to Apex Operations contained old restrictive covenants regarding mortgage debt assignments and asset redemption rights. For 10 full years, Darius worked 16 hours a day in complete silence. He lived far below his means, maintained no public social media presence, and ignored all rumors circulating within the Charleston business community regarding his downfall. While Celeste and Derek threw lavish corporate galas, purchased high-end real estate, and took out massive loans to fund rapid expansion into boutique hotel management, Darius focused entirely on purchasing the debt obligations of Sterling Capital's primary lenders. Through Apex Operations, Darius quietly bought up delinquent commercial paper, high-yield promissory notes, and property liens attached to every project Sterling Capital attempted to develop. Royce set up an interconnected network of private holding accounts that kept Darius's name off public regulatory filings while accumulating controlling interests in Sterling Capital's debt balance sheets. Celeste believed she was borrowing money from institutional private equity funds located in New York and Atlanta, but every major credit line her company secured over 7 years was secretly funded or acquired by Apex operations. By year 8, Sterling Capital appeared to be an absolute success from an outside perspective. They managed 4 luxury boutique hotels across South Carolina and had secured approval for their largest development yet, the $60 million Grand Oak Resort in Charleston. However, behind the high-end marketing campaigns, Celeste and Derek were running dangerously low on liquid operating capital. They had exhausted their cash reserves to maintain an elite public image, purchase personal yachts, and host multi-million-dollar industry events. To complete the construction of the Grand Oak Resort, Sterling Capital took out a massive bridge loan from a private equity lender. The loan agreement contained a standard legal provision stating that if Sterling Capital defaulted on any secondary debt obligation or experienced a negative change in its debt-to-equity credit ratio, the primary lender held the immediate legal right to convert its loan into absolute voting control over the entire resort property. What Celeste never checked was that the private equity lender was a wholly owned subsidiary of Apex Operations, managed directly by Royce Miller. 6 months before the 10-year anniversary party, Darius instructed Royce to execute the final phase of their operational plan. A secondary commercial debt note of $400,000 tied to Sterling Capital's headquarter building came due. Darius deliberately chose not to offer a routine payment extension. He let the due date pass while Celeste began making elaborate preparations for her 10th anniversary party. Celeste decided to host a massive gala inside the newly finished main ballroom of the Grand Oak Resort to showcase her corporate success to the business elite of South Carolina. She spent over $200,000 on floral arrangements, security, high-end catering, and media coverage. She invited local politicians, bank executives, and media teams to witness her success, completely unaware that 48 hours prior to the event, Royce had formally registered a notice of commercial default in the county court registry. If you are still watching at this point, drop a comment with "I'm still here" down below. Let's see who is truly following this shocking story. Now, let's get back to what happened next in that Charleston ballroom. Back inside the ballroom of the Grand Oak Resort, the quiet lingered over the crowd. Guests who were holding champagne glasses stood perfectly still, watching the confrontation near the entrance. Celeste's face had gone pale as she struggled to comprehend the words spoken by Thurston Vance. She stepped closer to Darius, lowering her voice, trying to project a sense of authority. She told Darius that whatever legal maneuvers he was attempting, her attorneys would tie him up in litigation for years. She claimed that Sterling Capital held an exclusive operational lease for the ballroom and that he had no legal right to stand on the property during her private event. Derek supported her statement, asserting that they had signed a binding venue agreement 6 months earlier and had paid the full venue rental deposit. Darius pulled a thin stack of legal documents from his leather folder and handed the top page directly to Derek. Darius explained that the venue agreement signed by Sterling Capital contained a standard tenant compliance clause requiring the holding firm to maintain fully solvent corporate status. He directed Derek's attention to paragraph 14, which explicitly stated that any tenant in active default of primary credit obligations forfeits all operational lease rights immediately upon written notification by the property owner. Darius stated that the Charleston County Sheriff's Office had formally served the default notice to Sterling Capital's legal agent at 5 o'clock that afternoon, exactly 1 hour before the anniversary party was scheduled to begin. Therefore, Sterling Capital was occupying the Grand Oak Resort Ballroom without a valid lease agreement. Derek stared at the official court document in his hands, his fingers shaking as he read the Chancery Court stamp and the signature of the presiding judge at the bottom of the page. He leaned toward Celeste and whispered that the paperwork was completely valid and legally binding. Celeste turned on Derek with visible frustration, demanding to know how a formal default notice could have been issued without his knowledge. Derek tried to explain that he assumed they were operating within a standard 30-day grace period to resolve the balance. Darius interrupted softly, explaining that the standard 30-day grace period applied only to primary commercial mortgages, not to secondary bridge loans that contained explicit cross-default triggers connected to Apex operations. Thurston Vance stepped between Celeste and the ballroom guests. He addressed the crowd of Charleston business executives directly. Thurston announced that effective immediately, the Grand Oak Resort was operating under the direct control of Apex Operations and its principal owner, Darius Whitaker. Thurston stated that as chief executive officer, his legal obligation was to execute the directives of the incoming majority owner. He turned to Celeste and informed her that her private anniversary event had been canceled due to material breach of contract and financial default. Thurston then signaled to the resort security officers, the same men Celeste had called to remove Darius, and ordered them to escort all non-paying guests affiliated with Sterling Capital off the property. The impact of the announcement swept through the room immediately. Local journalists who had been brought in by Celeste to document her evening began taking notes and photographing the legal documents held by Derek. Business leaders who had invested capital into Sterling Capital's recent projects began talking quietly among themselves, realizing that their investments were now tied to a defaulting company. Celeste looked around the room and watched her social status disappear in a matter of seconds. She turned back to Darius, her demeanor changing from anger to open desperation. She asked Darius how he could do this to her after 10 years, asking if he was truly going to ruin her business and reputation over an old divorce settlement. Darius looked at her without any anger or excitement. He reminded her of the exact words she had spoken to him on the steps of the court 10 years prior, when she had called him weak and incompetent. Darius told her that he had spent 10 years allowing her to build her corporate structure on top of debt assets that he had systematically acquired step by step. He explained that he had not set out to cause a scene. He had simply built a superior legal and financial position while she spent her money on public displays of wealth and social status. He told her that business was strictly structural, and her company was failing because she had prioritized appearance over operational control and debt management. At that moment, Royce Miller walked into the ballroom carrying a second leather case containing the court orders for immediate asset seizure. Royce approached Derek and handed him a comprehensive legal package. Royce explained that Apex Operations was formally initiating foreclosure procedures against Sterling Capital's equity holdings across all 4 of their regional boutique hotels. Because the cross-collateralization provisions had been activated by the default notice, every corporate bank account, operational contract, and revenue stream registered to Sterling Capital was frozen pending complete court review. Royce informed Derek that their corporate credit cards had been terminated 30 minutes prior, meaning Sterling Capital lacked the financial ability to pay the resort staff or cover the event expenses. Derek looked at Celeste in absolute panic. He admitted to her in front of the remaining guests that they did not have enough liquid cash in their personal accounts to cover the event costs because they had leveraged their personal properties as collateral for Sterling Capital's debt. Celeste realized that her entire lifestyle was crumbling around her. Her jewelry, her luxury vehicles, and her private residence were all tied to the personal guarantee agreements that Darius now owned. The resort security team stepped forward, positioning themselves behind Celeste and Derek, politely instructing them to collect their immediate belongings and exit the resort property. Celeste attempted to hold her head high as she walked toward the main exit doors, but the contrast between her entrance an hour earlier and her current exit was obvious to everyone present. The guests stepped back to create a wide path, avoiding any association with the falling company. Derek followed her with his eyes fixed on the floor, holding the court default papers in his hand. As Celeste reached the front glass doors of the lobby, she turned around one final time to look back at the ballroom. Darius was standing at the center of the executive group, calmly discussing the schedule for the morning board meeting with Thurston Vance. Darius did not look back at her as the glass doors closed behind her. 10 minutes later, the main ballroom was cleared of all non-resort personnel, and Darius walked up to the top-floor executive penthouse suite alongside Thurston and Royce. The suite offered a full view of the Charleston harbor and the city skyline. Thurston handed Darius the master corporate ledger and the key card to the executive office suite. Thurston admitted that when he had been hired as chief executive officer 3 years ago, he had no idea that the silent investor behind the equity group was the man Celeste Sterling had tried to push out of the industry. Thurston expressed deep respect for the discipline Darius had shown over the decade, waiting until his legal leverage was absolute before revealing his position. In the days that followed, news of Sterling Capital's financial collapse spread throughout the South Carolina business community. The Chancery Court proceedings were quick and decisive. Because every debt assignment had been drafted precisely by Royce and backed by clear capital reserves from Apex operations, the court ruled entirely in favor of Darius's company. Sterling Capital was forced into complete corporate liquidation to satisfy its outstanding debt obligations. Its physical properties, operational contracts, and real estate holdings were integrated directly into Apex operations. Celeste and Derek were forced to forfeit their private real estate assets to satisfy the remaining deficiency judgments. 3 weeks after the resort incident, Celeste attempted to contact Darius directly by calling his corporate office line. Royce took the call and placed it on speakerphone inside Darius's private office. Celeste spoke with a quiet, exhausted voice. She asked if Darius would consider waiving the personal deficiency judgments so that she and Derek could avoid filing for personal bankruptcy. She admitted that she had misjudged him 10 years ago and acknowledged that he had built a far stronger organization than she had ever managed to create. Darius listened patiently until she finished speaking. He then spoke into the speakerphone with a steady tone, telling her that the legal contracts and court judgments would be executed exactly as written, without any personal hostility and without any exceptions. Darius explained that 10 years ago, she had used court procedures to strip him of his business without showing any fairness or consideration. He told her that he was not acting out of personal anger. He was simply allowing the legal and financial terms she had signed to proceed to their logical conclusion. Darius then politely ended the telephone call and handed the file back to Royce to finalize the receivership process. Celeste was left with no remaining assets, facing complete personal bankruptcy and the realization that her former husband had spent a decade outworking and outthinking her in every aspect of business. Darius Whitaker stood on the terrace of the Grand Oak Resort looking out at the harbor as the sun rose over Charleston. He had not sought revenge through emotional confrontations, public drama, or illegal methods. He had relied entirely on discipline, long-term strategy, and legal precision to rebuild his life, reclaim his standing, and construct an enterprise that could never be taken from him again. He had demonstrated that enduring success is not achieved through loud claims or social display, but through quiet preparation and fundamental execution. Everything in this narrative occurred with absolute legal continuity. Darius Whitaker lost his original company 10 years ago due to a false accounting setup organized by his ex-wife Celeste and her partner Derek. Rather than reacting with noise, Darius spent 10 years building Apex operations, quietly purchasing Sterling Capital's underlying debt, and securing legal control over their core properties. When Celeste attempted to publicly humiliate him at her anniversary party at the Grand Oak Resort, she was unaware that Darius was the sole controlling owner of the entire establishment. CEO Thurston Vance confirmed his identity. The event lease was terminated due to active corporate default, and Celeste's business dissolved completely under the weight of her own unmanageable debt. Thank you for listening to this story today. If you enjoyed seeing how patience, strategic planning, and self-control defeated arrogance in the end, please hit the like button right now. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you never miss another intense story. Drop a comment below to share your thoughts on how Darius handled his return. We will see you in the next video.